From the mysteries of the universe to the mysteries of the unknown, this is Mysterious Realms with Mr. Cyber. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Here is your host, Mr. Cyber.
Hello everyone, welcome to Mysterious Realms. I am Elijah, aka Mr. Cyber, and welcome to another show. The show today is going to be interesting. I got an anonymous email, believe it or not, from someone calling themselves Mr. John. Mr. John has apparently worked out at Area 51, Groom Lake, for quite a while. No details have been given because I guess he wants to remain anonymous. But we do have him on the line with us, and I'm very interested in what he wants to say because I think we all want to know about what's going on at Area 51. So let's get Mr. John on the line and see everything that he has to tell us. I don't know what he's going to say or what he's willing to tell us, but I'd say let's get to him. Mr. John, are you there by chance?
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much for having me. But I wanted to let information be known about what is actually happening at Groom Lake and Area 51, it's technically the same thing. Area 51, if you want to narrow it down, the reason it's Area 51 is out in the Nevada test range. There's multiple areas of land. The specific area of land that Groom Lake sits on is just a regular piece of land that's called Area 51. On top of that, you have other pieces of land like Area 50, 51, 52, 53. And that's just how they lay out the land structure through the Bureau of Land Management. So the name, that's essentially where the name Area 51 came from. But the backstory is I started in Groom Lake. I'm not going to give you very specific details, but I'm just going to give you a self-estimate. It's been about, let's just say, a little over a decade I've been in Groom Lake. I will tell you this, as your listeners may or may not know, Groom Lake was originally intended and discovered and built for spy programs. When I'm talking about spy programs, I'm talking about spy aircraft, especially a place where we can test and build aircraft that our enemies would not know about. This had nothing to do with distrust in public. It's no different than a regular company coming up with a new invention and a patent. And when you're working on this design, you want to keep it hidden so another company or corporation doesn't get their hands on it, where they can copy it, release a patent before you actually get your final design out. So that's the whole point pretty much of Area 51. It was started out pretty much as just a spy, pretty much started out as a location to build aircraft that we could use for intelligence and spy programs, whether it was new technologies, new aircraft, advanced weapon systems, pretty much anything that you can think of. Groom Lake, or in quotes, Area 51, was the main location. And of course, around there, we have the Nevada test site where a lot of the nuclear detonations took place just south of there. So there were different areas of this whole, designated landmass, if you want to call it that. But yes, I have worked at Groom Lake, which the public know is Area 51, for, I'm just going to say, 1 or 2 decades. I'm not going to go further than that when it comes to the specifics, just to keep everything safe. I don't want to let too much out when it comes down to this, if that makes any sense.
Well, yes, it does make sense, Mr. John, and I really appreciate that. I do want to start going back, and I want to ask you specifically, what kind of projects, or if you can go deep or as deep as you can, what were you working on? Because that's what a lot of people want to know. And if you go back, pretty sure you're familiar with 𝗣𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗧. And 𝗣𝗨𝗧 has a very interesting story because he was the first ones that came out and exposing what he did at Groom Lake or Area 51. He was talking about reverse engineering of UFO technology, specifically the engines, which he was working on. I guess it was the propulsion systems or whatever. What were you specifically working on? Or I guess to this day, what do you work on? I know you can't give a lot of information out, but is there anything you can relay to us?
So when I first started at Groom Lake, I was assigned to a division called Special Intelligence. What this field of study did, we went through everything we know about our adversaries' capabilities, okay? Whether that came down to aircraft, technologies, pretty much everything that encompasses the umbrella, okay? So when I started there, I was pretty much given a task to just go through a bunch of information from other countries. From there, it kind of grew. And when I'm talking about growing is I'm talking about what I was responsible for. So it all started with kind of intelligence collection to see what our adversaries had. And then from there, it actually progressed into more information kind of getting leaked in about what was actually happening there. I started taking on roles of different technologies, believe it or not. And it just wasn't one specific thing. I can recall the very first thing that I got involved in were specific aircraft. Your audience may know or may not know about the Aurora project, which is actually a spacecraft slash airplane or airplane slash spacecraft, which goes, from my estimates, from everything I know specifically when I was work on this project, not flight research or anything like this, but I was in charge of a lot of the bulk of the paperwork. From what I saw, the Aurora spacecraft could hit up to Mach 12 at the initial stages of the project. And from there, I know, or I believe, the top speed got close to a Mach 18. And I just want to give you a quick reference. I don't know if you or your audience saw the new Top Gun movie, Maverick. At the very beginning of that movie, you'll see a scene where they're flying an aircraft, okay? Tom Cruise is the pilot or the test pilot of this aircraft that's going at hypersonic speeds. Believe it or not, that is actually factual. We've had that technology for probably going on, I'd say, 25 years. And the reason you really don't hear a lot about this is because, of course, it's kept under wraps, and our adversaries, we do not want this information to get into their hands. But the Aurora spacecraft is actually a factual aircraft. It does exist. As these projects were coming through, I was actually blown away, because when I saw some of this information, I was stunned, thinking there's no way an aircraft could go Mach 10, let alone Mach 18. So just fathom that. That is 18 times the speed of sound. What I will tell you also is the Aurora spacecraft, or airplane, whatever you want to call it, does currently fly in our skies. It's been flying actually quite a bit. The reason nobody sees it is it's so high up, kind of like how the U-2 spy plane flies very high for aerial photos. The Aurora spacecraft usually flies at an altitude of anywhere from 130,000 feet all the way up to around 230 feet. So if you want to put it this way, it flies within the atmosphere on the edge of space. So the pilots that are flying this craft are actually astronauts, because once you get above that specific level of the atmosphere, you technically are an astronaut. But going Mach 18 is so fast, you're not going to see it. As well, it's not picked up on radars because it is a stealth plane. And a lot of people may not know that. The way the engines are built on it, they do not release a heat signature. Your traditional aircraft have turbine engines, jet engines, as we all know, propellers, going back into the very beginning. But these use a different type of engine, which I will tell you work on an anti-gravitational system, which actually may shock a lot of people. But anti-gravity, going back to the story of 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, is actually true. When I got these special papers come across my desk when I was doing a bunch of intelligence gathering, and I had to sort through all these papers, that just absolutely blew my mind, because I did hear the story in the past of 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, and I already knew at that time about Groom Lake and Area 51 because, of course, I work here and I worked there at that time. Everything that 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 said, from what I have seen cross my desk, is actually true. When it comes to element 115, I'm not sure if that element is used with the Aurora spacecraft specifically, but I can tell you that there is some type of element or some type of source that is being used to get to those speeds. It's not regular jet propulsion technology, or the ways whenever we test out hypersonic aircraft, it's not used that specific way. It's kind of confusing when I talk to this or try to explain this to people, because the technology behind it is so advanced, it's so inconceivable that people would think it's out of a Marvel movie. The fact is, it's actually real. It's pretty crazy, to say the least.
Well, you are actually correct, and everything you're saying is just mind-boggling at the moment. It's actually very fascinating, and I appreciate you telling this, Mr. John. So you were working on, I'm guessing, gathering the special, what do you call it? I guess you were gathering information from other countries, if I'm not mistaken, and then your job was to do what with that?
Well, specifically my job, when it came to getting the paperwork or getting the information from our adversaries and these other countries, was to go through it and to see what technologies they were up to date on. And to tell you the truth, a lot of these other countries, they do have inside people that leak this information. And there's other multiple ways, which I am not going to go into, on how we get this information. We do not want to indulge that, of course, and I am not going to speak on that today, and I never will, because we do, number one, have to protect our country and our way of life, and secondly, the specific information, we do not want to get into the wrong hands. If it gets into the wrong hand, that is not a good thing. So the last thing I want to do is put our country in jeopardy. I don't want to put us in that corner, because the United States, in the world's eyes, is the defender and the protector. We provide a lot of support to countries, whether that comes to defense, intelligence, pretty much safety around the world. And for that reason, I'm not going to give away specific sources or details on how we get this, because our world position is to actually lead the fight, and not a bad way, but in a good way. So we need to keep a lot of this information and technology that we have secret, and we don't intentionally keep it from the public. I just want to let the public know that this is not intentional. We keep this away from everybody.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. The defense of our country is very important. The last thing we do want to do is get this technology into the wrong hands. But the question I have, and a lot of people might have, is there anything bad going on there? I know that sounds like a weird question, but a lot of people have the opinion that bad things are happening there to go against our country and the world, or there's a bad agenda going on. Are you able to speak on that? Because I know that's a concern to some people.
When it comes to that question, no, there is nothing bad going on at Area 51, Groom Lake. Like I said before, everything we do is to protect not just our country, but the rest of the world. Because in a way, we are essentially the main world dominant leader. Today, just by watching the news, you'll see China and Russia are actually heavy hitters on the world stage. But if they knew what we actually had, including the rest of the world, they would be beyond shocked. It's beyond everybody's imagination, the technology that we actually have our hands on. It's the type of technology that we plan to use in good ways. We never want to use it. That's the last thing. But some of the things we do want to use because there are positive technologies, let's just say aircraft that we have that keep an eye on everything. When it comes to spying, we don't use this type of technology against the people of the United States or other countries who are just regular people. That's the last thing we ever want to do. I'm not ruling out that there are factors in other governments and other countries, including our own, that have an agenda to use this type of technology. But one thing I will tell you is everything I see and that comes across my desk is actually a positive thing. It's not just for defense, but a lot of this has to do with our technology going forward to help the world, whether it comes to space exploration, going to the moon, going to Mars, eventually leaving our solar system, which I can tell you we do have aircraft that have left our solar system that have been manned. And a lot of people might find that intriguing, or they might find that as a shock, but this has been going on for a long time. And I want your audience to just know, currently, the public seems to think that the current fastest airplane is the SR-71 Blackbird. I got to tell you, the Blackbird actually came out in January of 1966. So if you look, actually think deeply about this, they want you to believe that the world's fastest aircraft right now is still the aircraft that came out in 1966. And right now it's 2023. So that should tell you a lot. And with the advancement in technologies that we have, and especially the technologies that go on here at Groom Lake, we actually have aircraft and systems that will just absolutely and completely blow everybody's mind. It's a beyond imagination.
So when you're talking about technologies, can you go in depth specifically on what you have seen firsthand and what you're able to talk about? Because the only information I know is, and I think a lot of the information that we know pretty much came from going back once again to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 and his story. I want to get your take on that. Like, what else have you seen or that you know that we have? Like, stuff's really deep. So if you could give us a quick, or not a quick, just as much as you can tell us on what you have seen that we currently have, that would be a big help.
Oh yeah, that's a very great question. Thank you for asking. So currently, going back to what you just referenced about 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪's story is fact, okay? I want to let the audience know that. What a lot of people don't know is 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 did not let all the information out that he has. And the reason he didn't release a lot of the information that he has knowledge on is for the protection of the American people, good people in the world, believe it or not. It's not that he didn't want to release it. It's just there are a lot of good things that we work on here as well that help in a big ways behind the scenes. We do not want to let anybody know about these technologies and the things that are currently being worked on. Going back to what 𝗙𝗪𝗟𝗓 did say, he is 100% correct. And as your audience may know, what we do here at Groom Lake in Area 51 is very compartmentalized. So you might have one specific, let's say, unit working on engines or propulsion systems. And then in another sector, you'll have people working on the mainframe of an aircraft. And then let's say you have another department unit that works on, let's say, the initial airframe, let's just put it like that, of an aircraft. And compartmentalized means that you should only know what you need to know about what you're specifically working on. So if I'm working on an engine, I cannot know about anything else about what that engine is used on. And going back to the 𝗙𝗪𝗟𝗓 story, as I am aware, he was working on trying to reverse engineer these engines that were, of course, anti-gravity engines for the propulsion systems of these craft. He didn't know a lot about what was going on in the other areas, and that is for a very specific good reason. Going to that point, the big downside of that is it slowed down a lot of our research, because when you're not openly communicating with different teams and different individuals working on a project, it's kind of hard to get that information cross-referenced, because you do work with the buddy system at Area 51, and you're very limited. There are middlemen who do know all the aspects of a specific project that is going on. They relay that information back and forth between the different teams, depending on a need-to-know basis. So everything 𝗙𝗪𝗟𝗓 did say and brought up on all of his various interviews is 100% legitimate. Can confirm that. Going back to the question that you had regarding our current technologies, there's a lot of different things that we're working on. Some of the main things that we have been working on in the past was the F-22, and people know about the F-22 because that is complete public knowledge. We also had the Joint Strike Fighter, which was an advanced fighter aircraft as well. So we work on a lot of different things that the public does know about, but the public only knows about 10 to 15% of everything that we actually work on. A lot of the fields that are actually being studied and researched out here at Groom Lake vary in nature. And I'm just going to go down a list of the things that we do work on. Yes, we do work on reverse engineering alien spacecraft. That is number one. That is just a very slow process due to what I just mentioned, everything being compartmentalized. And this has not changed since I've been here, or since my knowledge, since Groom Lake was even started. I do believe it. The compartmentalization piece started drastically when we started working on reverse engineering alien technology. I do not know why the government is so secret about it, but it can be understandable that a lot of this stuff we do not want to get into the wrong hands, which is pretty much common sense. So we do research on reverse engineering. We do have alien spacecraft in our hands. Another big one that I actually find more impressive right now, nowadays, people are always just stuck in the mindset of aliens, 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 and UFOs. What they don't understand is a bigger project going on. Many of you may have heard of Project Pegasus. One of the big things that we have achieved, and this was decades ago, was time travel and teleportation. That is not a myth, ladies and gentlemen. This actually exists. This has been going on for quite some time. I do not know the specific origins of how it was founded or when it actually initially began, but time travel and teleportation does exist. We have teleported humans, and we have sent individuals on trips to the future. And I do know they have captured a way to go into the past as well. The extent of that knowledge, I'm not going to give too much out just due to national security reasons, because this is a pretty big, if I can just put it into words, we just don't want to get this to get out, okay? Going back to that, people are aware that there are time travelers that people know, and if they don't know, your average astronaut is a time traveler just by like microseconds, okay? Or nanoseconds, let's put it like that. Whenever an astronaut is orbiting the Earth, the time actually changes. And when they get back to Earth, the relativity of the time is so small that it can't be detected on a normal level or scale. But astronauts are actually time travelers, because the faster you go, you're essentially going into the future. That's just basic time travel. The time travel that is being worked on and researched here at Groom Lake is vastly, vastly different. So let's just take the astronauts going a microsecond into the future after a trip in outer space for, let's say, they're up there for a week. That's not that much of a time change of them time traveling, but, you know, it's time travel, and we can't deny that. But the time travel that I'm talking about, from my knowledge, is we have gone a couple hundred years into the future already. Farthest into the past that I know we've gone has been a little over 100 years ago. And the way this works, from everything that, like I mentioned, crossed my desk, because I deal a lot with the information side and the organization of all these different projects, this is just, it's mind-blowing. It's kind of hard to explain to people. I personally do not know how it works, but it does work. I know there are portals that we created, and I do not know how that was done. We have a main portal here at Groom Lake, and I'm not going to tell you the specific area because everyone thinks it's a location that they see on Google Earth with the runway and everything. No, we have different areas of land out here, and I'm not going to tell you where this is because it's far from Groom Lake, or it may not be far from Groom Lake. That's where the main portal is. That's where people enter and return. We do have portals throughout the world that are capture portals. And when I say capture portals, that means when they take their leap or they walk through the door out here at the Groom Lake testing facility, that's the doorway. The receiving portal are portals where you step out of. So let's say we had a portal in Europe. They would step through the door or the portal here at Area 51. They would exit one of the receiving portals in Europe instantly. So it's no different than walking through a doorway in your house and entering another room. So that's how the portal works. When it comes to the science behind it, I am the last person to even ask. I do not have this information. I am not privy to it, unfortunately. Just because things cross my desk does not mean that I see everything that's in there. There's a lot of different compartmentalization when it comes to information coming across desks. In a sense, I am a middleman, but there's different middlemen. We're all compartmentalized. So that's when it comes to teleportation. When it comes to time travel, like I mentioned, from what I've seen, is the furthest we've gone into the future has been up to 200 years. The farthest back we have gone is roughly a little over 100 years into the past. The way this is achieved is by gravitational fields. There's a lot of testing that went into this many years ago. We actually used children and teenagers who voluntarily were asked to do this. And they weren't just random children or kids. They were actually volunteered through individuals that work out here, of kids they knew or individuals they knew. But going back to that point, they were not the very first test subjects. The very first subjects were simple things like eggs, chickens, rats, mice, you name it. It's no different than when we test a new drug for the FDA to get approval. It never starts with a human. That's the very last thing you want to do. The way everything's broken down, I do not understand how this works specifically. I can tell you, and I'm going to mix a little bit of the teleportation and the time travel in the one. I can tell you that we do have, as a matter of fact, individuals making trips to Mars. And the way they get there is directly from here to Groom Lake. As you know, the way to get to Groom Lake is there's multiple ways. Of course, everybody knows the Janet flights out of McCarran International Airport, which is now Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas. They can also arrive here by bus. But of course, the easiest way is to take those Janet flights into Area 51. That's the most efficient and fastest way to get here.
And if you don't mind me interrupting you, I just want to, I'm like boggled. I'm like back and forth, like all confused in a way, but I want to go to Mars. So you were saying we have individuals on Mars. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. So we do have individuals on Mars as we speak. We've actually been on Mars for the last couple decades. We do have a base. Base is near the south end of the planet. The reason that being is, and this might sound weird, is it's the way the winds are very less, believe it or not. We don't want to go into the very center or the equator area of the planet because the winds are a lot stronger there. So south of the planet was the best place for us to start to build. One thing I do want to tell you is when we started going there quite a few decades ago, we actually started terraforming Mars. Now, what your audience may or may not know about terraforming is that's when you change an uninhabitable planet that us humans could not live on. That's a slow process of changing an environment into a livable environment. This is done by us setting up facilities there to release a bunch of plant-based gases that we have. We have a bunch of greenhouses on Mars, and they have a system set up to where we're releasing gas into the atmosphere. This is a very long process. But what it essentially does over time is it changes the atmosphere to be totally different, take on an Earth-type structure where they essentially become oxygen. But this is not overnight, and the goal is to, build more and more of these type greenhouse facilities. I know from what I last heard, we have about 25 of these facilities on Mars down in the south area, which are slowly releasing gases into the atmosphere. We do have regular missions there, portal jumping here from Groom Lake. The reason we are doing this with Mars is in case anything in the future happens to our planet, we're looking at this as a backup, or if you want to call it a plan B, but that's not our main focus. We're doing this because once we get deeper out into the universe, we want to be able to do this on other planets, and the easiest place to do it is Mars. It's a lot like Earth. It is farther from the sun, so of course you're not going to get all the proper UV and specific things you need from the sun for, let's say, things like photosynthesis or whatever. But the greenhouse effect that we are doing for the terraforming is actually slowly working. We have multiple sensors on the planet, and that's one of the reasons why the rovers were sent. The rovers were sent, of course, to gather data, but they were primarily sent to gather atmospheric and ground data for the terraforming that's actually going on. As you keep watching, especially the younger generation and then their kids and grandkids, ours will start to look different after a while. The appearance will start to change. It'll start to glow a blue, a very light blue, as a matter of fact, as these changes are happening. But I don't want to go too off topic because we were talking about teleportation and our time travel technology. These are actually the main factors and the main items that we work on at Groom Lake. Time travel, while that's a big one, in my personal opinion, teleportation is more important. To be able to get somewhere instantly. We do have receiving portals on Mars, and those were the final ones that were set up. The first ones, like I mentioned, were set up around the country and around the world for testing purposes. You may or may not have heard of the individual 𝗟𝗫𝗘𝗦𝗧. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes, I've heard of Andrew, and I spoke to him off to the side. And one thing with Andrew is I know he was telling me he was in this group of kids that was in this teleportation testing. You know, the story is very fascinating and it's very interesting. But, I am very familiar with him. But the question I also have is, what are the factual things when it comes to his story, and then looking at the technology that you're doing? Is everything that Andrew's telling us, is that very factual at all? Do you by chance know? Because, there's a lot of things going around about, like what you mentioned, Project Pegasus, and essentially that was surrounding teleportation. What do you have to say about 𝗟𝗫𝗘𝗦𝗧 and his story?
Well, when it comes to 𝗟𝗫𝗘𝗦𝗧, he is legitimate, okay? He did partake in the experiments when he was younger, so all that is absolutely true. Nothing he is saying is false. I will tell you that. Secondly, everybody thinks that in Area 51, our main focus is on unidentified objects, UFOs, alien spacecraft, and aliens. While that is true, we do have alien species out at Groom Lake, and we also have alien aircraft, which are unfortunately still being reverse engineered. What the population may not know is how far we've come since 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 worked out here. There's been a lot of advancement, and I'm not going to get too in depth on this, but we have figured out how their propulsion systems work, and we have implemented those into craft that we created. It's gone pretty well. The advancements in technology when it comes to propulsion. Now, the craft itself, without the propulsion, is just a craft. The metal that everybody thinks these crafts are made out of, they are different types of metallic structures. They're all on the periodic table. I'm not specifically sure of what elements they are, but they are all on the scientific element table. It's just the way they were, how can I say this, mixed together, joined, that created this specific substance that the crafts are made out of.
To go back to what you were saying, so you're saying that that we do have aliens, we do have UFOs, and we do have aircraft and different technologies that we're reverse engineering. And going back to what 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪's story was saying, you are essentially telling us that his story is real, but then since 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 has worked there, we've made actually advancements in this technology, Mr. John?
That is absolutely correct. we have made advancements in this technology. And like I just stated, we finally figured out their propulsion systems, and we are using them in craft of our own now. We are not using them in the Aurora spacecraft. Okay, that's a whole different propulsion systems that I'm not very familiar with. We do have aircraft that the public do not know about, which these engines are successful. They are, as a matter of fact, using form of element 115. Everybody thinks element 115 is just a single element. It is. It was first synthesized publicly over in Europe quite a few years ago when it was discovered, but it has different branches depending on how you isolate this element. One thing I do want to mention as well is all these reportings of UFOs or UAPs that we now call them. A lot of these craft that are spotted and seen are not ours. Most of these are from outside solar systems and are not of our origin. Now, I would take this back and say about 10% of the objects that individuals report seeing in the skies are of our testing that we do. A lot of the testing that we used to do was just hovering and doing flights over the glimmering test range. And that's during the initial phase when we were actually building, reverse engineering, and testing these engines. Because if you're testing an engine, you're not just going to fly it wherever you want. It doesn't work like that. The initial phases you want to just do where you lift off the ground, you set it back up. The next phase would do, you go a little bit higher off the ground and you move left and right, and then you settle the craft back on the ground. Those are the initial tests that we did. The other tests we did were, I believe, they were doing tests to see how fast they could go from a standpoint on the ground straight up. I know from that testing, I'm not very specific on the details, but from the ground to the edge of space was pretty much instantaneous. And in my eyes, that is the speed of light. I doubt it is the speed of light, but they pretty much went from the ground to the edge of space within an instant. Very interesting and very delicate testing was done in these instances. Now going back, when we went from there with these aircraft, is we started flying them in local vicinities at certain times of a day or week. Instead of just staying in one area or going up, we would take them maybe 20, 30, 40 miles from Groom Lake. We never did any flights over Las Vegas. It was always in the controlled airspace. And if you look at a flight map, you'll see the controlled restricted zone boundaries, which aircraft cannot fly through. Those are the markers that we did all of our flight testing in. Once we got the initial engines and the flight controls down and how this thing operated, we went a lot further than that. I believe the next test was actually going into outer space itself. I would probably say we went 400 miles above the Earth. From there, I do believe we went out past the moon on some of these tests. And going from there, it's very up and down, because from some of these tests, they were initially from the alien craft that we recovered, but then once we were able to successfully reverse engineer these engines and the propulsion systems, we incorporated them into our own aircraft that we built, which the public do not know about. What this lets us do is, let's say, for instance, we had a bomber. What we would do, this bomber aircraft, if we had to do a nuke, just imagine if we had to go to another country for a conflict, we could get there within a microsecond. versus a normal, let's say 13, 14-hour flight, we can transport a lot of stuff. What a lot of people don't realize, we have transported a lot of items to conflict zones throughout the world using this technology. We do have major cargo ships that we can load tanks on, helicopters on, whatever you can imagine. We can get them to their destination within a second. And that's one thing I will say. I'm not going to go more in depth on that. What you watch on the news with us delivering supplies is real, but what they don't know is the behind the scenes of the secret operations that we have going on, where we can get supplies and items instantly to a specific location. Now, we're very slow at rolling this technology out, and I'm not going to go, this is very touch and go. I'm not going to go further than that on this due to national security and potential issues. I can say, as a matter of fact, that this is real. This does exist. It is currently being used for good. There's nothing bad about this because it's currently, even after all these decades, is still in a kind of a testing phase. So once you know it's working efficiently, you can use it to your benefit. We find that to be a great resource. We work very closely with the Department of Defense, the CIA, of course, the NSA, and other industries, without saying any more, to get supplies delivered to certain areas, whether that's food, whether that's vehicles, whether that's equipment that's needed. We do that, but at the same time, we also use regular methods of transportation that everybody's familiar with, such as ships, regular aircraft, to get items and inventory that is needed to these locations. That's the first initial use of these craft that we have designed with the reverse engineered engines that we were able to rebuild and replicate. So I just want to let people know that these are being used in a good fashion. There's nothing nefarious about it or bad about what's being done. The main secrecy behind Area 51, like I previously mentioned, to protect the interests of the United States, especially when it comes to enemies. We do not want our enemies' hands, let's say North Korea and other countries, to get their hands on some of the stuff that we have. And that's why we're not trying to be hiding. We're not trying to evade the public, but we do need privacy when we're testing and when we're trying to roll out these technologies, because it's in the public's best interest. Now, I will tell you this. A lot of these technologies will slowly be revealed, just like how the F-22 stealth fighter was revealed, the same as the Joint Strike Fighter. Those were all done here at Area 51 Groom Lake, where they were designed and tested, especially through Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman and a lot of these other big defense companies that work with us. There's a lot of good happening. A lot of this stuff will be eventually revealed to the public. This just has to be done in a slow manner, because if people see what we have, it's going to spook a lot of people, a lot of individuals. But that's not the main reason why, of course. The main reason is for national security. Stuff is slowly being released, and I really hope that makes a lot of sense to you. But I wish I could tell you more. Unfortunately, I can't, because it's a very sensitive topic, and I understand where people are coming from. Just to reiterate one more time, going back to what Bob Lazar was doing, he was 100% right, and everything he said was correct. But the good news is from that is we have successfully reverse engineered the engines, propulsion systems. We are using them in our own aircraft that we have designed, which, at least I'll tell you that much. I'm not going to go more in depth on what's being done. Yeah, it's very intriguing.
Wow, that is That's absolutely. I'm speechless right now, Mr. John. I'm blown away, because when you talk about everything from the whole teleportation aspect that we have, including the time travel that we've accomplished, I believe what you were saying, and what we're using let's say these UFOs or this technology for now, that seems to be a really actually a great thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's it's exciting, and I appreciate you coming out and telling us this. I got no clue who you are, but I mean, this is absolutely stunning. One question I do have is, so we all know Area 51 Groom Lake, the main area. Are there other areas that people do not know about that are at Groom Lake? Because you always hear these stories about there's stuff inside the mountains, etc., that are built in. Do you have anything that you can say about that, or that you can reveal?
Well, Elijah, I appreciate you asking me that question. Area 51 and Groom Lake, those are not the only areas around. We do, as a matter of fact, have a lot of facilities that are built directly into the side of mountains. You wouldn't believe what these exterior doors look like. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is you could not tell the difference between the normal side of a mountain and a hangar door. That's how camouflaged the facilities are. There is an area south. I'm not going to give a specific location, but it's called Area S4, which does have hangars, and which is where we originally kept aircraft that we recovered and we were reverse engineering. We have about, I'm just going to give you a ballpark, anywhere between 7 to 15 other locations, nowhere near there, that are inside of the mountains. And I'm not going to say anything more, because this is, of course, I don't want to put anything in jeopardy and at risk. There's a lot of other hidden facilities out at Groom Lake within that whole area. And not everything is in Area 51, the piece of land that's out here. We have other pieces in different areas other than just the land for the section that we're in, 51. But that is basically all I'm going to say about that. I'm sorry. I would actually tell you a lot more. It's too sensitive in nature to even go down that, let's say, road, if you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, I completely understand what you're talking about, Mr. John. I know you can only say so much. We can only talk so much. Are there any oh, you know what? There is one question I have. Are there aliens alive out at Groom Lake there, or Area 51? That's something I would like to know. And not just me, but our listeners. Are you able to talk about that? Or is that something that's off limits?
What I can tell you is, yes, we do have alien species here at the area. I can also tell you that we have a couple that are alive. They are well. And what's interesting about the ones that are alive is they can breathe oxygen just fine. Unfortunately, a lot of the alien species that we captured, they unfortunately passed. The oxygen concentration was not sufficient for them. And we were not, from my understanding, able to pinpoint what they needed to actually survive. And that's what the challenge was. But the aliens that we do still have can actually breathe our air. That's actually a good thing. When it comes to talking to these aliens, we have found a way to communicate with the aliens. And if you go back and look at some videos on YouTube, the way we train monkeys and apes to communicate, especially apes, with blocks and symbols and things like that, that's kind of the form that we use to communicate with these aliens. It's not by talking to them we use a different language, and that's with pictures and objects and things like that. But these aliens are actually, if I can describe it, I have seen one, and it's kind of odd looking. If you want to talk about what the texture of the skin was like, imagine if you've gone fishing and caught a fish where the fish is not slimy, but it has that wet look to it. That's exactly what they look like, believe it or not. And this one looks kind of human. It does have a very different look to it. I've tried to find one on Google and different sources that are online. A lot of them are right. Unfortunately, most of the images or the perception that people have of how aliens look is completely wrong. They're kind of close. They do have eyes, they do have a nose, a mouth, and everything like that. But the regular pictures that you see of what these aliens look like, it's not that close to what you really see. And you watch a lot of fake videos online of these aliens alive and talking. That is not what they look like, unfortunately. But yes, I can confirm we do have living aliens out here. They are very well. They're working with us. We're working with them. They have to live in a specific atmosphere. They're not locked up. Of course, they can't get out. They work closely with us. And I don't know in what capacity, because I'm not directly involved in that. Like I was stating earlier, I just go through a lot of the paperwork that crosses our desks. The stuff I read and the stuff I've seen and that I actually get involved with is very interesting. But I just want to let everybody know out there, no, everything you hear about is very real. And it's actually very exciting stuff. I will tell you that. I mean, since I've been over here, like I mentioned, let's just say a decade, 2 decades, or less than that. I'm not going to give you a ballpark. It's very, very exciting. I wish the public could see this, but unfortunately at this time, they can't. I know it's hard to say trust us, especially now in today's world, but there's a lot of good stuff happening for the benefit of the people in the world. Why we kept a lot of this stuff and still keep a lot of this stuff secret is to maintain that foothold, because we do not want specific individuals to get their hands on this technology. And that's why it's hidden. It's not hidden because we don't want you to know. It's hidden because if in the wrong hands, it would be used in a very, very bad way. And that's an understatement from everything that I know. And everything I'm telling you is very limited. I've only told you about 5% of everything, but that gives you a general idea of what we're working with. I can rest assured and tell you that everything we're doing is good. There's no bad stuff happening out here. Everything's just locked down because of national security interest. So I don't want to have the audience get the idea that there's malice going on, because there is none of that. If there was, I would have been gone years ago. I myself have a family, just like you do. I have children. I'm not going to go more into that. But if I knew there was bad stuff happening, I would not want to be part of something like that. And I would not want to be involved in a Gestapo type of mentality or project going on. I want to come forward anonymously so I can tell you about what's happening. People still work here. We do sign our lives away when we come to work for the area. We give up pretty much our constitutional rights coming here. I will tell you, the benefits outweigh the cons, because there's a lot of good intent going into this. The people that work here are very genuine, lovely people. They're hardworking people. We have doctors and nurses and engineers out here, just your everyday people. We have janitors out here that work. They have to sign the same paperwork as everybody else, but they're they have families too. And if there was bad stuff happening, trust me, someone would have leaked a lot of that stuff a long time ago. The fact that they haven't tells you something. There's no scare tactics. And while, yes, people do get intimidated and bothered if this information is leaked, but no harm's going to come of them. All the government does is try to make fun of them and just act like, oh, that person's crazy, that's not true. But our government has never taken anybody from Area 51 because I work, like I told you before, all the information crosses my desk, and I know of every employee that's here. Everybody is fine. But that's what it takes to protect our country, to get new technologies in place, and it's very interesting stuff, and that's what I have to say.
Well, Mr. John, it's I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I know there's so many more questions out there. I would love to have you back on sometime if that's okay, because this is a big topic that I know a lot of people want to know, and it's especially me, and some of the stuff you told me is just mind-boggling. Is there anything else? I'm sorry to even push this. Is there anything else you can tell us at all? I mean just something. Like one question is the moon. Is there anything on the moon? Are we going back? Like, what can you tell us about that?
When it comes to the moon, like you were saying, Elijah, a lot of the big questions is, have we gone to the moon? People really want to know this. And the answer is this. The video you saw when Neil Armstrong and the rest of the astronauts landed on the moon, that was initially staged. And the reason that had to be done was in case something went wrong, they'll had to record something, show the public. But at that time, we were pretty much going through a competition or a challenge with the Soviet Union to see who could be the first winner in the space race. But I will tell you that Neil Armstrong and the rest of the astronauts, they did go to the moon, as a matter of fact. I don't want to say they never didn't, because they absolutely did go to the moon. And we've been back a couple times. And the one reason we haven't gone back, there are alien bases on the far side of the moon. And not just that, there are bases on the side of the moon that faces us. At that time, we didn't have a complete grasp on aliens and what was happening. But now, since we have a lot of this up-to-date information that we work with, the 𝗟𝗡𝗦𝗥, we understand now, and that's why we're already planning a mission back. And if you've been watching the news, especially with SpaceX, we've already named the astronauts that are going back to the moon. So everything's fine and dandy when it comes to that. That's not a problem anymore. The problem we pulled and we haven't gone back is we did not know what we were dealing with at that time. Now we have an understanding. We have aliens, we have aircraft, and we know what it is. And these bases that are actually on the moon are just hubs. I mean, there's nothing bad about them. It's no different than us sending a rover to Mars. But these bases are really not inhabitable. They're just like rover stations. Our rovers are tiny that went to Mars, but these are just infrastructures that are there, and a big majority of them are to help communicate. I do not know how the aliens send communications when you actually have the speed of light as a limit. That's something else that we're still trying to research, is how they can communicate at such vast differences, whether they're communicating via a time portal. We just do not know that yet. But that's why we're going back to the moon, because we know a lot more now. There's no issues. And everybody was worried about the radiation going to the sun. But back then, we had proper shielding on the aircraft that went to the moon, especially back with the Apollo missions. So radiation was not an issue. And of course, you're always going to get radiation into these spacecraft. We knew about that at a time, so the radiation was not a problem, especially those magnetic fields that surround the Earth. But we're going back because we know what we're facing, and it's not a big issue now. I know now we just want to go to the moon and do a lot of research and show the younger generation of what we're capable of and they can do in their futures by actually studying and getting educations. And not everything's about what we have at Area 51 or what we're hiding. A lot of that stuff has to do with educated individuals who know how to work with this, who know how to reverse engineer this technology. So that's a very important aspect. So it's exciting times going back to the moon. But there is really nothing else I have to say, Elijah. If the government ever decides to just let it all out, then I could talk to you normally. But until then, unfortunately, I can't. And I really apologize for that. I really appreciate you having me on this show. It really means a lot to be able to get out there. I've been hesitant to go on any shows. I was actually looking at some shows to talk on. I was looking for a platform that didn't have a lot of listeners and everything, just so I could just pop in, if that makes any sense. And but I really appreciate you having me.
Well, Mr. John, it's been great talking to you. I mean, I'm blown away by all this information, and it's thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute honor having you, and it's pretty cool knowledge that you give us. And if it's okay, if I could have you on again sometime, if that's possible, if there's any way to reach you, do you have any way?
As a matter of fact, I will send you a follow-up anonymous contact. Of course, it's all fake, spoofed emails, but I will provide you some information if you want to speak again. I will provide that to you. And just please do not send this information or get this information out, because it's very sensitive. You cannot trace the email. You can't trace the phone call because the way I am making these communications. I really appreciate you having me on and letting me be heard so the public can get an understanding of what is currently happening at Groom Lake in Area 51. And I look forward to talking to you again, Elijah. So I really want to thank you for letting me speak today.
No, Mr. John, is absolutely my honor, and I thank you once again. Is there any last things you want to say one more time?
No, that's about it. Thank you again. I look forward to speaking with you and all of you again in the future. So I have to take off now, but thank you again for your time. Yeah, I'll give you a call if things change, but they're very slow out here. But I'll be in contact with you if that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Mr. John. And once again, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you as well, Elijah. It's been an absolute honor. And I really greatly appreciate you having me. So you have a great day.
You as well, Mr. John.
Thank you very much, Elijah. Take care.
Bye-bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. John. I don't know who he is, but he works out at Groom Lake, Area 51. So, whatever you think about that is up to you. I gotta re-listen to this because I want to hear everything he said again and again. So, Mr. John, thank you. It's been an honor, and I will talk to you on the line after the show, so please stay on if that's okay for a moment. But ladies and gentlemen, I am Elijah, aka Mr. Cyber, and I look forward to talking to you again here soon. Until next time, take care.